The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not those of the hosts and/or guests, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The content is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Deep Dive,
the podcast where we take you beneath the surface and explore the legends of pop culture.
from the characters you loved on TV and in movies,
To the toys you couldn't live without.
we are your hosts. I'm Cosgrove.
And I'm Lumi. Every week, we'll dig into the stories behind the icons of our past, revealing what made them unforgettable.
So, buckle up for nostalgia, surprise facts, and all the deep cuts you never knew you needed. This is Deep Dive.
Ever fire up a modern game and just go, whoa, how'd they even do that? I mean, we've come a long way from blocky pixels to these hyper-realistic worlds, right?
It's funny you say blocky pixels because today's Deep Dive is all about the console that made those iconic, the Atari 2600.
Right. Everyone knows Atari, but the story behind it, that's where things get really interesting. We're digging into some documents, Atari 2600 VCS.txt, and let me tell you, this console almost didn't happen the way it did.
Oh, absolutely. Atari was barely staying afloat back then. And get this, they were this close to using a totally different computer chip for the whole thing.
Seriously, what changed their minds?
They had to deal with Motorola for their 6800 processor all lined up, but it fell apart.
Man, talk about a sliding doors moment. So what, did they just stumble onto a better chip?
You could say that. They're at this tech show, right? And they bump into MOS Technology, tiny company, but they had this chip, the 6502, go for dirt cheap.
Dirt cheap? Like how cheap?
We're talking $25 a chip. Motorola wanted hundreds.
No way. That's a no-brainer. Got to go with the cheaper option.
Do it.
Wasn't there a catch? Cheaper chip probably means less power.
Right, they're catching on. The 6502 was a little powerhouse, but it had limitations. Programmers had to get really clever to make those games work.
I bet. It's like trying to build a skyscraper out of toothpicks. Give us an example. How'd they pull that off?
Think of it this way. They had to outsmart the hardware. One trick was racing the beam, basically. They sync their code with the way the TV drew the image.
Whoa, wait, seriously? That's thinking outside the box.
It was. That's how they squeezed out extra detail, those little visual flourishes that made the games pop.
So that classic Atari look, all those blocky sprites, it wasn't just a style choice. It was them literally hacking the system to make it work.
It was a necessity that became iconic. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So they've got this scrappy little console, way cheaper than anything else out there. But how do you go from that to, like, conquering the living room?
That's where Atari proved they weren't just tech wizards. They knew how to market. They needed a game. A huge game.
Let me guess. Some space shooter thing.
Bingo. Space Invaders. Already a monster hit in arcades.
Right. But tons of games tried to copy that. What made Atari's different?
It wasn't just a copy. It was the arcade experience at home. This was huge back then. You didn't go to Space Invaders. It came to you.
Okay, I can see that being a game changer, but was it really that big of a deal?
Think about it. 1.25 million cartridges sold. That's more than DUBA, the number of consoles they'd sold before that.
Whoa, okay, so this wasn't just some game. This was like a validation for the whole console, the whole idea of home gaming.
100%. Yeah. Space Invaders was the Atari's killer app, proved you could hang with the arcades. But success, well, it attracts attention.
Meaning competition.
Not just competition.
Yeah.
From inside the house. Remember those programmers, the ones squeezing magic out of that limited chip?
Yeah, those guys were geniuses.
Well, some of them, led by this guy, David Crane. They saw an opportunity. Why just make games for Atari? Let's make our own Go company.
Wait, so they're going to make games for the Atari, but they're not part of Atari. Was that even allowed?
It was unheard of. Third-party development, that's what we call it now. They call themselves Activision. And Atari, they were not happy.
I bet. So what'd Atari do?
If they sued. Copyright infringement. claimed Activision had no right to make these games.
Whoa, that's intense. This little startup going up against the big guys?
Yeah.
Who won?
David beat Goliath on this one. Court sided with Activision, said they had the right to make games for the Atari.
Talk about a precedent. This wasn't just about one company. This changed how games got made from then on.
Absolutely. Opened the floodgates for independent developers. More creativity, more games, everything we love about the industry now. It traces back to that moment.
Man, who knew back then what a huge GE deal that'd be? But Atari's story, it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? All right, so Atari's got this winning formula, but nothing stays on top forever, right? What tripped them up?
Competition. New consoles started popping up, better tech, could handle more complex games. So the good old days when a new console actually meant a big leap forward.
Exactly. ColecoVision was giving them a run for their money, games like Donkey Kong. Coleco's version was practically arcade perfect. Atari, not so much.
Ouch! Yeah, the Atari Donkey Kong, I've seen it. It's like they tried to draw a masterpiece on an Etch-a-Sketch.
Pretty much. So Atari had to do something big, and what's bigger than Pac-Man?
Nobody says no to Pac-Man, except, wait, wasn't the Atari Pac-Man, how do I put this nicely?
A disaster.
That's one word for it. Again, I've seen it. Flickering, blocky. It's like they kidnapped Pac-Man and made him walk on hot coals.
They rushed it. Sacrificed quality to cash in on the name. But here's the thing. It still sold millions.
No way. People bought it even though it was, well, that.
Brand recognition is a powerful drug, my friend. But the real Atari downfall. That's E.T. territory.
Oh, yeah. Here it comes. The game that's practically a mythical creature in itself.
More like a development nightmare. They had 6 weeks to make that game.
6 weeks? Most games back then took 6 years.
Right. They wanted to ride the movie hype wave. Bad decision. It crashed and burned. Millions of unsold cartridges in a landfill.
It's almost poetic, you know? Atari starts by defying limitations, ends up limited by its own bad choices.
And that's the lesson, right? Innovation, marketing, luck. You need it all.
Yeah.
But never underestimate the power of a good game. Atari forgot that.
And gamers never forgave them.
Well, we still talk about it, don't we?
Oh,
So the Atari 2600, more than just a console, it's a story about what to do, what not to do, and how those choices echo through gaming history.
Yeah, I think we just leveled up our gaming knowledge. So next time you're glued to your 4K, Ultra HD, whatever, take a second. Remember the Atari 2600. Those simple pixels, they sparked a revolution. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. If you want to help us out, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment to help the algorithm. See you next time.